Just want to share with you this recording that governs the explanation for enhancement theory number 3, which what we will cover here is black and white mixer along with split toning our images as well. So if you can kind of see here, I have a pretty good compilation of images showing. I have portraits and also landscape, architecture, and so forth, just to kind of give us an idea for what we can play with. So what I'm going to do here is let's go ahead and start with a landscape shot. I have the Coliseum here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and take an image into development module, and the first thing what I'm really going to do is play around with the basic panel and the tonal curve if necessary. As always with all of our images, we should come in here and work these all these controls first in the basic panel to make sure our images look good before we do anything else to them. In this case, I think this is looking spectacular compared to what it was before, as I'm about to show you here. So this is what it was before, and what we have done is actually put some tones into it, which looks rather nice. So I think we're going to go ahead and keep that. Now, to work with the black and white, what we're going to do here is come down in our panels, and next to our HSL, what we worked on last week, we're going to click on B and W. Once you click on B and W, your images will turn into black and white right away. Now, in the black and white mixer, you have the same tonal controls, that little button there called the target color selector, or the adjusting the tones here, and I can actually drag this out, and notice if I bounce these on the different areas of the image, you know, this is also bouncing again, corresponding to the colors that are underneath it. As you can kind of see, when I'm on sky is blue, on the trees is somewhat green, yellow, orange, and so forth, and on the building itself is somewhat orange. So let's play around the tones a little bit. Again, very similar idea to HSL. Let's say I want to darken the sky. What I would do is I would hover the mouse over the area that I know is blue, or the sky area. I would just hover my mouse over it, and what I'm going to do next is go ahead and click on it. Once I click on my mouse, though, the cursor will disappear. I'm holding the click on my mouse right now. I'm activating the tools, and literally, if I want to make the blue brighter, I would push up, as you can kind of see here. Or if I want to make the blue darker, I would go ahead and just pull that down and create a really dynamic sky in my landscape image here of the Coliseum. I'm going to actually brighten up the bricks a little bit. Let's say that I really want to go all out with the foliage and make them all super bright. So kind of have to play around a little bit and make sure that you sometimes have to come back and dial each color individually. Let's say you want like the green to be really bright, you can do that as well, and the yellows. So you have the opportunity to come in and play with the tones and the images here to make them look great. Let me kind of show you another portrait here of my friend Noemi. And we're going to look at this portrait and see how we can turn this into a black and white. I'm going to go ahead and increase the contrast quite a bit on this one because it's a little bit flat. There's a shot backlight. Pull some highlight back, put some shadows in, and just set the white point so that the image pop. I like this the way how this image looks right now in color. Once I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and come into black and white here. And this is where I would come and play. Again, I would click on the target color selector right there. And just pull this over a different area of the image I want to change. Most of the time, bringing people's skin tone and make them lighter like so help reduce a lot of the blemishes and so forth, and that helps a lot. Now, with this image here, her lipstick is red, so if I want to darken her lipstick, I can go ahead and pull the red down as well. Or I can also line it as like that at the same time. Depending on what looks great and the tones that you want, you have to kind of come around and play in this a little bit. You can try to play around with the tones individually. As you can kind of see, I'm just literally dialing this up and down. Let's say I want to darken the blues. Okay, not doing a lot of changes here for this image. Well, it does when I actually brighten the blue right there. So notice though that if you start doing a little bit too much of a tonal change, you start to get these weird effect looking things, and usually when something like that happens, it's just a note of something to keep in mind, that you probably may have pushed it a little bit too far and you want to dial it back a little bit. Turning an image into black and white can also be used to kind of avoid situation with difficult lighting situation. For example, this is not bad, but he was lit in a fluorescence lighting environment. So I'm going to go ahead and increase the contrast, turn it black and white, change the shadow to highlight here to white, and go ahead and turn this image into black and white like so. And you have the opportunity, like I said, to come again in here and change the tones and how everything else look in your image, as you can kind of see here. Okay, now with black and white, we can actually just, I'm going to show you one more example here. We can do something rather creative out of this. So if I have something extremely graphical like this image right here, I'm going to go ahead and punch up the contrast still and fill in some shadows and pull recovery and whites and so forth. I'm going to go into black and white. Now, if I turn this into black and white like right now, it looks rather dull and boring. So I'm going to grab the target color selector here, come into the window, and just really darken that window up like so. So if you can kind of see here, I've made a really nice graphical image versus something, you know, with just the white skies. You can kind of see here it's rather dull. When I've gone ahead and do this, let me go back here. It looks rather interesting. So you can always go ahead and do something like this as well. Okay, so that's pretty much black and white in a nutshell, B&W. The next thing what I'd like to touch on here is how to do split toning. So I'm going to actually go back and start with the portrait of Noemi again, actually, and go ahead and split toning. Split toning is where we can use this information right here to induce color in our image or put a tint on it per se. For instance, I'm going to do this picture right here. I'm going to make this sepia. And actually, you know, let's make a virtual copy. So I'm going to highlight this file, go into Photos, create virtual copy, and just kind of show us how this would look in sepia. So I'm going to go ahead and pick like a yellowish color. The key here is not to necessarily pick a red brownish tone, but more of an orange kind of yellowish tone, as you can kind of see here. And I'm going to dial the saturation down a little bit there. So you can pick the colors from here or dial up the value, the hue and the saturation in combination. Whatever you feel like will work for this one. And again, you would come in and do this for the shadow side as well. Now, for a successful sepia, as I mentioned in class, what I found out worked best is to kind of keep the numbers for the hue and the saturation the same. So if you can kind of see here, I just gone ahead and click in a box and just type in the value of a number. If I want this a little bit more red, I can dial this back just a touch like so, a little bit brownish. And you can kind of play around with the relationship of the color as well, if you can kind of see here with the shadows and the highlights. It changes a little bit. For example, I push more towards the highlight, the white becomes, especially your skin becomes a little clearer. If I pull it down more towards the shadow, it becomes a little heavier, a little bit more brown. So something just, you know, to play with and have fun with. And as always, you can always double click on the names of anything to to change the setting back to default. Going to make one more virtual copy of this, and the shortcut key for that is Command apostrophe. In this case, what I'm going to do is split toning, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the shadow side of this one blue and a little bit less saturated. This is where if I dial this balance up to the highlight, you can see the skin tone becoming highly warm. If I pull this down to the negative side, which is playing more towards the shadow side, you can see the tone become really blue. Let's say I want to balance it right about there. I want to increase the blue in the shadow a little bit. So you can kind of do something like that as well and play around with your images. And if I show you all the threes together right now, they all look rather different, if you can kind of see here. The first one is just a pure black and white with sepia, and kind of a split toning look. Okay. Moving away from a portrait, I want to actually show you a sepia on this Coliseum image as well. So let's go into the development module right here. And you know, the sky's the limit for this, so go ahead and play, have fun. Whatever you decide is appropriate for this, just literally go and have fun with the image and play around and see what you can do with it. You know, that's what really photography is all about anyway. So we're gonna do a sepia looking image here. This is like 3428. You can just type it in like I said, and I believe this is way too red for me, so I'm gonna dial back the saturation on both, make the color a little bit more yellowish. There you go. And again, I can come back and play around with the highlight, the balance as well. It changes ever so slightly, especially when these two numbers are different. They're not that different here, but there's just slightly different, and you can kind of see the changes there. So anyhow, this is pretty much the ET03 black and white and split toning kind of explanation to our things. If just for kicks and giggles, let's do this one here. This one will make an interesting case because you have a wall that's predominantly one color. So you can really go in and change the way how this wall color would look. Here, go into black and white. So I can actually click on here and I can predominantly make this wall really, really light tone, or change this so that this wall is super, super dark at the same time. So you can do a variety of things with the black and white mixer as well. Okay, and as always, one of the biggest caution I could probably give you when you've done something too much, or if you've gone too far, if you zoom in 100%, you're going to start to see things showing remnants of overprocessed digital files. As you can kind of see here, there are halos around the buildings right there already. That's because I gone ahead and pushed the sky way too far here. So you see a lot of those halos around the image. So when you're working on these, just kind of keep in mind as well, don't forget to zoom in 1-to-1 and kind of have a look and browse around to make sure you're not getting of these undesirable effects. It really gets ugly, particularly in the area where you have like tree lines. And the buildings you can kind of somewhat get away with. This is really extreme. So just something to keep in mind there. Okay, so this is Enhancement Theory 03, and hope you found this helpful.